Hello, this is Rachel Kenny. I'm a listener from Golden, Colorado. I'm a health science specialist at the Seattle-Denver Center for Innovation for Veteran-Centered and Value-Driven Care, which is a research group within the Department of Veteran Affairs. We conduct health services research and operations projects focused on the healthcare needs of veterans. I love that my podcast playlist and Amazon wishlist grow after every episode of the People on Projects podcast, and earning PDUs on the commute is a great way to multitask. If you enjoy the podcast like I do, leave a review on iTunes or whatever podcast app you use. Thanks.
Welcome to the People and Projects podcast, where you'll find interviews and insights to help you deliver projects and lead teams. You can find us on the web at peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Hi, this is Andy Kaufman, President of the Institute for Leadership Excellence Development Incorporated. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the People and Projects podcast. You know, I'll bet you recently walked by a beautifully landscaped area, okay? Maybe it was someone's home or on a college or corporate campus, but you walked by that beautiful area and perhaps you even told yourself, wow, that's stunning. But here's something I bet you did not say to yourself. Wow, that's stunning. This place must have an amazing program to develop outstanding leaders, right? I mean, we appreciate beauty, assuming we're not staring at our mobile devices and missing the beauty around us. Do you know what? The work and planning that goes into the beauty around us is so easily missed. Now, I bring this up because a publicist pitched a book to me a while back named Growing Weeders into Leaders, okay? And my first two reactions were, what a cheesy title. Maybe a bit like the music playing under me right now, okay? And second, what value could a book about developing leaders in a landscaping organization do for my global listeners? I mean, few of which are in the landscaping business. Well, for some reason, I agreed to review the book, and I gotta tell you, I'm so glad that I did. Author Jeff McManus runs the landscaping operations at one of America's most beautiful college campuses. And Jeff's little book with that cheesy title is a helpful read for any of us who are serious about growing the leaders around us. Hey, quick note, if you're a certified project manager, you are earning PDUs every time you listen to the People and Projects podcast. We have over 104 hours of free content to help you learn how to lead and deliver. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you get value from these episodes, leave a review on iTunes or LinkedIn or give a shout out on social media. Thanks. Okay, let's talk about growing leaders with the Director of Landscape Services at the University of Mississippi. Yeah, that's right, Ole Miss, based on his book, Growing Weeders into Leaders. We're talking today with Jeff about his book, Growing Weeders into Leaders. So, Jeff, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Andy, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you and your listeners.
Well, thanks. You know, Growing Weeders into Leaders could sound like a book for directors of landscaping services. Let's say someone sees that title and goes, hey, so what's that book about, Jeff? How do you respond?
Well, the short answer is it's about growing people. Actually, it's about making more money. It's about having more time to do the things you want to do. It's getting rid of some of the pain that you have at work and getting answers, doing more with less. Yeah. And it's really about changing attitudes of the people we work with by growing them and develop them into leaders.
Yeah, I took away from it is you see people differently. That's our job as leaders, to see to see the people that report to us differently, or the people we're trying to influence. In fact, I started as a software developer, and as I grew in my career, I could have read this book and it could have been named Growing Coders into Leaders or project managers into project leaders. So let's walk through some of these lessons. You mentioned in the book that leaders generally underestimate how much their behavior affects how people feel about their work. So let's talk about that. Tell us more about that idea.
Sure. I mean, I didn't realize this until really when I got out of college. I had a lot of plant knowledge. I knew how to do a lot of things, but I was learning too. And the biggest learning curve I had was that I had to realize that I was the boss and that people actually listened to me now because I had a title, and they also were watching my facial expression, but they were listening to everything I said. So When I was at a place in Orlando, I was managing some folks, and they asked me, "Hey, how do you like this flower bed, this huge flower bed that we've just planted here?" And I said, "Hey, it looks good, but a few of these plants are out of line, and this is sort of messed up over here." And I was just nitpicking,
Yeah.
Andy, their stuff. I mean, it was nothing that anybody would have ever noticed.
Yeah.
And Rick, who was my supervisor, my chief head guy that everybody in the company knew and loved, Rick kind of stood up. He looked at me and he dropped all the tools that were his hands, and he said, "I quit, Jeff." And he turned his back on me and walked away.
Yeah.
Now that'll get you attention because, this is the number one, he's the go-to guy. He's really running this thing. And what I found out later, Rick and I talked later, and we were able to work things out. Rick came back, and people say, "Well, why did you hire him back?" Or why? I was like, it was a lot of my fault.
Yeah.
Why he did that. I had pushed him so much, and he told me, "Jeff, your words matter. The way you keep nitpicking this and these little comments," he goes, "you're not encouraging us, you're tearing us down."
Yeah.
And that was a learning curve for me that I never saw. It was a blind spot that I had.
Yeah. Yeah. You think about how we talk about other departments and how we respond to conflict. And I wouldn't say it haunts me as a father there, Jeff, but we all know that our kids are going to learn far more about what we do and how we act than what we say, right? And same thing as a leader. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And modeling the way is so important. When you read some of the key leadership books, you see that that's what most people watch is they watch the leader, and then they either trust them or they don't trust them based on what they're seeing.
Yeah. We've had Jim Kouzes on twice, and that's something that he emphasizes over and over and over. And I think we all get that intuitively, but in the moment, because we don't see ourselves all that clearly, and to have, I'm sure that interaction with Rick was not a gift at the moment, but it turned out to be a gift. Yeah.
Oh, you're so right. It's something that I've never forgotten how important those life lessons are. The tone of voice, your eyes, and you think about a working man who's been on his knees sweating. Yeah. He's dirty, and he's got a lot of pride of ownership, and then you walk up and make some kind of snide comment like that can really just tear a man down.
Oh yeah. Many of the leaders listening to us, they're responsible for leading some sort of change, ultimately some sort of change initiatives. And quite frankly, they're going to have people on their teams that don't want to change. And when you did your transformation efforts at Ole Miss, you talked about in the book that there were some times that people just didn't want to do it differently. So how did you deal with the people on your teams that did not embrace the changes?
Well, that's a great question, because that's a lot of what I ran into. And in a state organization, it's not easy to walk in and just say, "Hey, you're fired." I mean, you get on the right ship or get off the ship, right? But what I learned is that I needed to have the attitude of making other people successful. That had to be my true motivation. And that's where I tap deep is I want you to be successful. Whoever you are, you're working with us here. I want you to be successful. So I've got to do a couple of things to make you successful. One, it's got to be clear what the expectations are. And two, I've got to communicate with you if there's a problem. I've got to be open with you and honest with you. I'm doing you a disservice if I never talk about it and I ignore anything that's going wrong. And three, I have to make sure that I follow the rules. I have to do the same things and hold everybody accountable for that. So that's what we did is I started making things very clear. I wanted people to be winners. I wanted them to be champions. And so we started creating this culture of winning and getting to what it looked like to have a win and to be successful. And a lot of people were attracted to that. But those that were not tended to weed themselves out. They tended to go a different way. And so a lot of times that was easier to do that. They just found other jobs and other opportunities as they realized that we had high expectations and we were going to win some national championships here. Yeah.
Yeah. And as it turns out you did. In the book, you said those who did not embrace change either left the organization or were held accountable. And there's some people, not the Ricks, but there are some people when they say I'm leaving, inside you're going, woohoo.
That's right. You're giving the fist pump inside.
Right, yeah.
And it's a win for them and it's a win for you because deep down they're not happy, and they're making other people miserable as well. So yeah, sometimes it's a win-win.
Yeah, but I am intrigued about the second part though, or we're held accountable, because I think sometimes people, this is where they let it go. They forget this part of it. And so any other comments about, all right, so this person isn't leaving, but they're not doing what they need to do. You made it clear, you tried to communicate expectations, you came up with guidelines and rules and things like that, but they're still not doing it.
That's a hard part, especially for people who don't like conflict, which is most of us. We don't like to deal with conflict. We don't like to deal with people problems. And you talk to a lot of people, that's why they're not in management, is because they don't want to have to deal with the deficiencies. Yeah. But if you choose to ignore it, it will not go away. It will just get worse. Mm-hmm. And so you have to deal with it. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the meanest person in the world. But again, the motive is you want them to be successful.
That's it.
And what does success look like? Well, hopefully you have clearly laid that out in what the expectations are. We expect you to be at work at 6 a.m., ready to go, not running down the sidewalk at 6 a.m. and clocking in at 6:01, right? You're ready to go, clocked in at 6 o'clock, ready to go to get on a truck and move out into the field. And so you clearly define it, and then your other people in the organization are going to get better the better we are at holding people accountable. So if you still have that problem, if you don't hold them accountable by counseling them, whatever that next step is, you're going to have problems with the good people, and more people are going to become, they're going to see that, and they're going to become like that as well.
Yeah, well said. One of my favorite themes in your book is related to a Tom Peters quote that you included, that leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. And you modeled this so effectively by creating Landscaping You and leader-to-leader classes. So tell us more about these initiatives and how they made a difference.
Well, Landscape You has been the huge leaps for us because it has allowed us to do several things. It has allowed us to get our standards in place. Mm-hmm. It's allowed to have some accountability, not only with supervisors and workers, but horizontally between workers. Everybody knows what the standards are. Yeah. And so no longer is it just a few people who say, well, this is the way we do it. No, we have Landscape You, and everybody's going through it and know those standards. It has freed up me and time-wise, because we have a process now that we can put people through from the day one when they get here. They go through our orientation process and learn our vision and what the expectations are. Leader-to-leader class that we developed really came from the fact that I was doing a terrible job of accountability when it came to gossip and rumors. And I said, I had to do two things. One is I had to hold people accountable for those actions, those behaviors. And then I needed to see if I can be proactive in creating a culture where people are excited about what they're doing and they want to be the best of the best. And so through that, I said, can I walk these guys in wisdom? Can I get them closer to changing their thinking by exposing them to wise leaders? Maybe listen to a TEDx talk, bringing in some speakers. Maybe I expose them to John Maxwell, Jim Rohn, Les Brown, some of these guys that are out there talking about how you can do better for yourself. Yeah. Taking them to the local library, showing them how to check out audiobooks, and maybe they're doing some of these things on their own. My whole formula is give them the opportunities to be successful. And, the better you become personally, the better your chances are of working your way up the ladder, being able to do more, earn more, and be better leaders at home as well.
What I love about it is, in order to do this, you needed a budget for sure. I mean, some of this was not free, but a lot of it was not expensive. No. And sometimes people, just feel like, well, our HR department doesn't fill in the blank, or my boss doesn't support fill in the blank. But this did take time away. I mean, they were not out mowing and doing other things when they're doing this. So there was an opportunity cost there. But really, it's probably even more effective organically, like you did it.
Well, if you're not consistent, what leader to leader just doesn't work. If you're not, I'm going to tell you the key, the secret to developing people is being consistent. So we put this thing on a schedule once a month for 1 hour, small groups of 5 to 10 people. And so I meet with about 6 different groups now, and I do this. And you would say, man, I just don't have time for that. I don't have time not to do this now, because what that little 1 hour class speeds us up 10 times faster because one word, it's a simple one word that changes it, and it's called trust.
Yeah.
Our team has begun to trust each other. They get to know each other. They talk about core values that they believe in, and they hear themselves, and now they have a voice at a table where they're sitting. So their stock in what we do has gone up. Their ownership has gone up. And so if you'd have told me, hey, you should try this, I would have thought, yeah, I'm sure it'll work. But I would have never guessed how it really changed our culture and has made my work so much better and so much more enjoyable, more time to do other things. And I'm blessed to be able to have that under my belt now.
I love it. I love how the dividend pays beyond just that one investment or those incremental investments. And another thing you did was you let people lead meetings instead of you always having to be the person. And that is a way to develop leaders as well, right? I mean, that's part of your strategy.
Yes. I mean, it's my goal is to let them become successful. Part of that success is you being a leader. So I want our staff to feel comfortable talking in front of people. I want them to feel when new students come to campus and they're working for us in our organization that they can mentor these students, that they can speak into their lives, that they can help them get to the next level as well and teach them how to be leaders. And speaking is a big way to do that. Communication skills is probably one of the number one things that either holds you back or gets you ahead.
Well, there's so many lessons I could pull out of the book, but one of the lessons in growing leaders into leaders is that leaders should make sure to clarify the win. So what do you mean by that, and why is it so important?
Well, you've played sports. We've all played sports, and it's real easy if you walk in and you see a game on TV. The only thing you got to do is look at the scoreboard, and you're pretty quick. You're up to speed with what's going on, right? You know who's winning. You know how much time's left. So you quickly understand. Well, at work, how do we know what's the scoreboard? I mean, how do we know if we're winning or losing, or how do we know if it's halftime? I mean, you've got to figure this out in the workplace. I heard Andy Stanley talk about this, defining the win. So what we've tried to do is not make the win, how much money you make. The win is, how well does your flower bed look? How well did we mentor the students so that they can work on their own without being supervised the whole time? And we continually clarify these wins and talk about these wins. When somebody gives us an email testimony of how beautiful the campus is, or somebody was called out at Walmart and says, oh my goodness, you work at Landscape Services, and those are wins. We love those kind of things because it's part of building their reputation, a part of building them up. So we have all kind of different wins that we go for.
I like it. And you can raise the bar. Like a scoreboard shows whether you win or not, but also a record over season does. And are we better than last year? And are we better as a team? Are we more efficient than we were? And so it is something you can keep re-clarifying the win as you go, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can do that with your budgets, and you can do that with your production and how long it takes to do. Some of that can get a little bit more in the weeds, so to speak. But, one of the things that our spray guy does, who controls our weeds, is can he get off his pre-emergent down in the window that he has to keep the weeds from growing in the summertime? That's a win for him to get everything, to get his ant control. We have a lot of fire ants here in Mississippi. So can he get off his, bait down before the season so that those fire ants don't get out of control? Those are wins for us.
Yeah. Let's say someone listening to us they're truly interested in more intentionally growing their team members into leaders in the year ahead. What are some specific strategies that you'd recommend for them to get started?
For me, everybody's different. Everybody's organization's different. Personalities are different. Is don't try to copy what I've done, but to read the book and maybe get ideas that you can use for yourself. So the reason to have any kind of meeting is twofold. It's communication and build leaders. Communication and build leaders. I mean, if you go into a meeting with that mind and purpose, that's a great way to do it. Yeah. So instead of you always being the one person talking, let's let everybody else contribute, and then let them know ahead of time what they're going to contribute, and see if we can get them where they're developing some of their skills. But I'm always looking for new ways that we can. One of the things we're talking about now is, could we do a newsletter out to our university about gardening tips? because our staff is always being asked about gardening tips. So could we do something like that? Well, that's not really in our wheelhouse. That's not really what we do. But again, that kind of pushes us into the leadership role of let's be the leaders in this. Let's be the voice in this area and be proactive in this. So that's some of the things that we're always looking to. What can we do that doesn't cost a lot of money? And how can we develop somebody's leadership in that?
That's great. Well, for those listening, if you'd like a dose of inspiration to grow the people on your teams, get a copy of Jeff McManus' book, Growing Weeders into Leaders. I put links to the book in the show notes for this cast. And Jeff, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Andy, thank you for doing this. Appreciate all the work with people and projects. Great host, and thank you for being in this space.
Before we wrap up this episode, I'd like to emphasize 3 points that I personally took away from Jeff's little book here. First, start with what you've got. Now, Jeff didn't really talk about this in the interview, but it's from his book. And I got to tell you, most days I'm speaking at companies or conferences on the topic of project management or leadership. And often when people come up afterwards, I'll hear something along the lines of, oh man, I wish I had a team that understood this stuff, or oh, if only my management got this stuff, okay? So the idea is that if only things were different, they would be able to take action on what they just learned. Well, I like to remind people, there's a former Secretary of Defense in the United States who said, you don't go to war with the army that you wish you had. You go to war with the army that you have. And we can apply the same for you and for me. I mean, Jeff says in the book that even when your team is not filled with the exact players you want, start training anyways and never stop. I mean, sure, maybe on your team there are some weeds you need to pull, so to speak. Maybe there's some staff pruning you need to do. And Jeff talked about that in the interview. But let's accept the fact that you need to invest in the development of your team now. That's what I need to do too. Not when our team, our culture, our management is perfect, because let's face it, it never will be. Start training them now and never stop. Second, I want to challenge you to clarify the win. Remember when Jeff talked about that? Project managers know the importance of having measurable success criteria before you start a project. I mean, organizations have metrics and dashboards that track progress against goals. And in many agile approaches, such as Scrum, there's this idea of definition of done. How do we know that a user story or a feature or an assignment is acceptably done? And some teams and organizations have service level agreements, right? You get the point. I'm just wondering about you and your team. Is there an opportunity to more clearly clarify the win? Could you and your team spend some time talking about how you can mutually assess that we're actually winning? I mean, we're getting better. So I found this can be a helpful exercise for your team, for discussions between you and individual team members, like what's a win for them, and even for yourself, like how do you know when you're winning, getting better? Consider how you might be able to apply Jeff's advice to clarify the win. And then finally, how about this? Don't wait for HR. One of my favorite parts of Jeff's story is that he didn't wait for his human resources department to create a leadership development program. He took it on himself. And I'd love to suggest that you consider that approach as well. Every year I run a program called the Leadership Fast Track Program. And this year I'm leading a group of over 40 people through the program. And one of the very specific things I'm coaching people to do is to start their own leadership development program on their team. It doesn't have to be some big, formal, high-budget initiative. In fact, here's something I've heard from fellow listeners of the People and Projects podcast. They have people on their team listen to an episode, then they get together and discuss the episode in a meeting. They talk about what they found interesting, what they found helpful, maybe even what they didn't agree with. I'm actually really okay with that. Then they put the focus on, what should we do about what we've learned here? Don't let this be an academic discussion. Keep the focus on what you and your team should do to apply the learning. Something even this simple can be done without requiring a program from your HR department or a budget. I gotta tell you, there are other lessons from Jeff's book that I know you could apply, but that's enough to get you started. You know, you and I are both landscapers, I suppose, right? We have a passion for growing teams and organizations. So give these ideas a try and let me know how it goes. Nearly every day I hear from listeners, and I would love to talk with you. You can reach me at show@peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Let me know your thoughts and questions about this discussion with Jeff. And one way for us to stay in touch is to connect on LinkedIn. You can do that at peopleandprojectspodcast.com/LinkedIn, which redirects to my LinkedIn profile. Let's connect. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Hey, one last thought. I am on a mission to help people see that project management is not just about having a title. It's a skill that all of us need, right? You and I, we both need influencing skills and time management skills and conflict management skills. We need all that. If you know of a group at your organization that has an upcoming gathering, like a company or a department or customer meeting, I would love to talk with them. I invite you to tell your colleagues on the planning team about the podcast and invite them to contact me about their upcoming large group gathering. They can reach me at show@peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Thank you so much.
Hello, this is Rachel from Golden, Colorado. Thank you for listening to this episode of the People and Projects podcast. Stay tuned for some outtakes from the episode. Have a great week.
Hey, Andy.
Jeff, how's it going?
Good. I'm glad to talk about your watering skills.
Yeah. I think there might be a class, landscaping I might need to go to.
Yeah, we're going to need to put you through Landscape U level 100 right away.
Do you have a like a CLEP? I won't pass the CLEP test. So yeah, thanks for your patience.
We'll put you in an 090 class.
Yeah.
That's the prerequisite.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for your flexibility. I really enjoyed reading the book, because of the podcast, I end up reading a lot of books, and it's just interesting how it's like 250 pages and pretty dense, and you really don't remember anything from it afterwards. And you did a nice job of keeping the points really pithy and applicable and practical. And so that was just fantastic. So well done.
Well, thank you. That's called a good editor, because I wrote that first book that you talked about, and my editor said, no, people like Andy are going to be reading this, so you need to make it pithy and better. So she fixed a lot of that. But no, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Just to get it on paper and out of my head was a big deal. So I'm so excited.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was at church yesterday, and the pastor was saying, he said, if somebody who knows you well, what is one attribute that they would say about you that's most contagious? And I mean, there's certainly spiritual applications to that question, but I think it was interesting. I thought of that when I was reading your book, because you talk about how we need to be contagious to or we are contagious to our teams, and whether it's a good contagion or a bad contagion, right?
That's right. So what was your one thing?
Well, the problem with self-deception is I don't think I'd be the right person to answer that. So I need to have a conversation with my wife, and she might be able to say it a little bit better. But certainly spiritually, you'd sure hope it shows somewhere up in the fruit of the Spirit. But if it's impatient, and if it's short fuse, those are probably not it. So
yeah, I've accomplished those. Those are easy to do.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, when I think of mine, my whole thing was trying to be. When you said that, I was thinking my one word is empowerment.
Yeah,
as I try to continue, I see so many employees who just are not engaged in work.
Yeah,
they're just there for a paycheck and a pension. And I'm like, man, if we can get them excited about what they're doing and see a passion, a purpose, and a passion, man, we can start moving some pretty big rocks around here and trees and things. So it's a pretty cool thing.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's clear from the book that was something that was more than just an aspiration for you, and people like Linda and many others got a hold of that, and it says a lot about them. But they have to be willing, but you also have to be willing to let go. So
that's hard. Yeah, you're exactly right. Hey, I'm Jeff McManus, and I am the head weed puller at the University of Mississippi Landscape Services.
That's it, man. So let's say whether I think in the book it said, is it 4 sons? Do I remember reading?
Yes,
4 sons.
4 sons.
Yeah. Yep. So what are the age ranges?
Right now we're at 22, 20, 19, and 16.
Yeah, we're very similar. We've got 23, almost 21. 17, so 2 boys and a girl, and then we adopted 2 little ones who are now 8 and 6. So when they first joined us, they were 2 and 1. So we went from teenagers to diapers, and so we forgot what that project was like, but it was
well, good for you guys.
23 to 6 now. So, but did any of them play football or any sports?
Oh yeah, we've done a lot of the different sports. Right now, golf is our big sport for our high schooler, and then Swimming is a big one still. One's swimming at Auburn on the club team, so
That's a big
he's
deal.
having a big time with that. He's the president of the swim club, so he's enjoying that.
Wow.
How about yours?
Yeah. Various ones, but you know what came to mind is if let's say you're on the up in the swimming stands or watching a golf and somebody goes, well, Jeff, what do you do? Like, how would you respond to that question?
Generally, I respond, I'm the director of landscape services at the University of Mississippi.
Yeah. And
that's
from there,
that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And then they might go on and ask further questions. They're like, you mean that beautiful campus is because of you?
Yeah. Now, I have thought about a creative one. You got me thinking. That's just why I told you this is a good question, is I started thinking, because when I talk a lot, and you read this in the book, is I started to say, well, I help cure HIV, or, I help put people into space, and then that kind of gets people, of course, but it takes people to a different area. Like, oh, you're an engineer. And I know I'm a landscaper, right?
Yeah. But you had I didn't save it in my Evernotes on it, but you have, we cultivate, and I'm trying to remember, what was it? Cultivate greatness. Wasn't that something?
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty inspiring there, Jeff. I thought that was a cool one.
Well, I didn't come up with it, so that's probably why you think it's inspiring. I mean, I had a student came in. He just leaned up against the door. I can see him right there. I'm looking at him right now in my mind, and he goes, I was just thinking, a good vision, and we've been working on this vision statement for daggum 2 years. Right. Trying to get it simple. We're listening to Andy Stanley's stuff.
Yeah.
Don't make it more than 8 words. Make it memorable.
Right.
Make it, stick, and all these things. And we're like, I'm terrible at this, especially for my own thing. And this kid just leans a wall and he goes, I think what we do is cultivate greatness. And he explained it. And I'm so thick-headed, I'm going, it's okay. But as it grew on me, I guess he planted the seeds. I'm going, that's a great vision statement.
Yeah.
And, it's not a complete statement. It's probably more of a tagline, but it works for us.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I think that's really good, Jeff. So yeah, I enjoyed the book and look forward to this conversation and getting the word out here. So,
well, I look forward to talking about it, Andy. And now, I don't know how you are, but every now and then, I don't mind. Like sometimes if you're saying something, I might just slip in a quick little.
Oh yes, absolutely.
That's right,
yeah.
or something, and I'm not trying to cut in.
Oh no,
I'm just like, or I might just if sometimes God gives you those little funny one-liners, I might just throw that in there. But keep talking. I'm not trying to interrupt you.
All right. So. All right. Well, you're too nice in the South to interrupt or anything. So
that's right. We know our manners here. Although
someone did tell me recently, they go, if somebody from the South ever tells you, well, bless your heart or something like that, they go, that's not a compliment. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. Those things around the internet, like, gives you what the real definition of bless your heart is. It's pretty funny what people come up with. But I think 90% of the time that's just an old saying that really does mean that.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is funny though when you start thinking about it. It's like, you dummy, something like that.
Yeah.
Bless their heart.
Yeah.
Great, Andy. Thank you, and take care, my friend.
Bless you. See you. Bye.
Bye.
But let's accept the fact that we need to invest in the development. But let's accept.